ঠাকুর বাকাতি বিনোরা প্রভু চরণে পড়িয়া. One more time, a little more. ঠাকুর বাকাতি বিনোরা প্রভু চরণে পড়িয়া. Bhaktivinoda Thakur fell at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. She Hari Nama Mantra Lao Tu Mi Magi Loi Lo Magia. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Shtotar Shishimad Bhai Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Gacharya Stottara Shishiman Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prems Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Go Bhakta Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan ki Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Shri Mayapur Navadip Dham ki Shri Jagannath Puri ki Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi ki Jamuna Devi Ganga Devi ki Samba Beta Bhakta Vrinda ki. Bring the Jamuna back to Vrindavan right now. Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Go Premanande Haribo.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Or I can, yeah, they should try to try. I haven't tried it like this. Yeah, that works. Just got to get on there. That'll work great. Where's our text here? Ahambura Bharto Nama. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jana Bhallabha Girivara Dhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajadana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Prabhupada Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotar Satyasi Siman, His Divine Graces, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 12, Rahugana converses with Jad Bharata, and it's text number 14. Aham Pura Bharataha Nama Raja Vimukta Drishta Sruta Sangabandaha Aradanam Bhagavataha Ihamanaha Mrigaha Abhavam Mrigasangad Hatta Artaha Aham Pura Bharato Nama Raja Vimukta Drishta Sutta Sangabandaha Aradanam Bhagavata Ihamano Mrigo Bhavam Mriga Sangadhatata Aham Pura Bharato Nama Raja Vimukta Drishta Shutta Sangabandaha Aradanam Bhagavata Ihamano Mrigo Bhavam Mriga Sangat Dathartha Aham Pura Bharato Nama Raja Vimukta Drishta Shutta Sangabandaha Aradhanam Bhagavata Ihamano Mrigo Bhavam Mriga Sangat Dathartaha Mukta Drishta Shutta Sangabandaha Aradhanam Bhagavata Ihamano Mrigo Bhavam Mriga Sangadhathartaha Pura Bharato Nama Raja Vimukta Drishta Shruta Sangabandaha Aradanam Bhagavata Ihamano Raja Vimukta-dishta Shrutta-sangha-bandha Aradhanam Bhagavata Ihamano Ladies. Aham Bharato Namaraja Bhagavata Ihamano Aham, I, Pura, formerly, in my previous birth. Bharataha Nama Raja, a king named Maharaj Bharata. Vimukta, liberated from. Drishta Shruta, by experiencing personally, through direct association, or by getting knowledge from the Vedas. Sangha-bandha, bondage by association. Aradhanam, the worship. You get that, the worship? The worship, right? Bhagavataha, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. Ihamanaha, always performing. Mrigaha abhavam, I became a deer. Mriga sangat, because of my intimate association with the deer. Hatta artaha, having neglected the regulative principles in the discharge of devotional service. Translation. This is Jad Bharata speaking to King Rahugana. If you haven't figured that out yet, that's... In a previous birth, I was known as Maharaj Bharata. I attained perfection by becoming completely detached from material activities through direct experience, and through indirect experience I received understanding from the Vedas. I was fully engaged in the service of the Lord, but due to my misfortune, I became very affectionate to a small deer, so much so that I neglected my spiritual duties. Due to my deep affection for the deer, in my next life, I had to accept the body of a deer. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The incident herein described is very significant. In a previous verse, it is stated, Vina Mahatpada Rajobhishekam, one cannot attain perfection without smearing the dust from the lotus feet of an exalted devotee on his head. If one always follows the orders of the spiritual master, there is no question of falling down. As soon as a foolish disciple tries to overtake his spiritual master and becomes ambitious to occupy his post, he immediately falls down. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado, yasya prasadam nagati kutopi. If the spiritual master is considered an ordinary man, the disciple surely loses his chance to advance further. Despite a very rigid life in devotional service, Bharata Maharaj did not consult a spiritual master when he became overly attached to a deer. Consequently, he became strongly attached to the deer, and forgetting his spiritual routine, he fell down. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschachade Satarane Oma Gyanam Timurandasya Garanjana Shilokaya Chaksurun Militum Jainam Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Chapatitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So here, Aham Pura Bharato Nama Raja, here's this mentally retarded person who was picked up to be a carrier of Rahuna's, what do you call it, sedan chair or whatever, palanquin, palanquin. And now he's revealing himself finally after spending a whole lifetime as acting as though he was backwards, so people wouldn't bother him, basically. Now, and of course, this is part of a history of 3 births: a king, a deer, and here, Judge Bharata. Yeah, sure, I could do it. Or you want to do it like this? So this is the, yeah, okay, that's better, yeah. 3 births, so he's saying now he remembers his past births. 3 back, I was the king named Bharata. And Vimukta Drishta Sruta Sangha Bandhaha. I was, Vimukta means liberated, really. I attained, Prabhupada translates it here, I attained perfection. Word for word, liberated. There's always 3 translations. The running translation Prabhupada gives, the word for word translation, and often there's more in the purport. So he also explains this. It was reached a perfectional stage, and yet he fell down. So this is extraordinary to think that this could happen. So he was Vimukta. He became Vimukta because from bondage, Sangha Bandha. Sangha is association. It can be good, Satsanga, or Asatsanga. We're advised Asatsanga Tyaga. You give up the association of those people who are not pious or asat. And satsanga, association with devotees. So here when he says bondage, sangha bandha, he was freed from that kind of bad association because of his vimukta drishta, by his own direct experience, what he had learned from his own direct experience, and by shruta, by hearing. Indirect, Prabhupada says indirect, from hearing from the Vedas. You can have your own direct spiritual experience, or direct experience of spiritual people, and also by studying. You can also learn that you accept the authority of the Vedas. Immediately you have so much knowledge that you could not otherwise acquire. So both of these methods is what he's saying. Direct and indirect experience. And then Aradhanam Bhagavata Iha Manaha. He was always performing worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As king, it's described in the Bhagavatam as King Rahugana. As King Bharata. He performed the standard Vedic ceremonies that were obligatory on a king to see that they were done, the various sacrifices. But he always did them as devotional service to the Lord. The traditional Vedic rituals can be done as karmakanda, or they can also be done as devotional service depending on the consciousness of the performer, as karmakanda, jnanakanda, or bhakti, actually, depending on the consciousness. The same activities. You just have to understand. I once heard a tape recording of Prabhupada when he was giving some initiations in London. And he said to one devotee, "Your name is Ravindra Das. Do you know who Ravindra is?" And devotees were saying, "The Sun King. Srila Prabhupada is the Sun God. Ravi is the sun and Indra is the king of the sun." And Prabhupada said, "No, it is Krishna. There is only one God." So actually all the names of the Devas are names of Krishna. And so when you say the names of the Devas, you could be meaning a particular empowered jiva, or you can be meaning Krishna, as according to your understanding. They're his agents. So Prabhupada was pointing this out. So this is how, although Bhakta Maharaj was doing ritualistic karmakanda activities, they were being done as devotional service, because he was an advanced devotee. And then, of course, he gave up the kingdom and went into the forest. Because he was a kshatriya, he didn't strictly take sannyas, but he took up the renounced standard of life. And then he says, Mrigo abhavan, I became a deer. After all that, you see, I got so high, doing complete worship, and then I became a deer. Why? Mriga sangat, because of association with the deer. And therefore, hata arta is all basically. He destroyed his purpose of life, or his focus, his aim was destroyed, his value. The value of his life was destroyed because of this. Everything he had accomplished, everything he had built up, lost it because of association with a deer. This is, and if you remember that portion of the, it was not, such a gross thing in a way. He was at the bank of a river getting some water, Mahaj Bharata, and a tiger growled in the woods nearby, and a doe, a female deer. Actually, by the way, it's the black deer. It's mentioned in the text earlier, the so-called black deer, which is actually a kind of antelope, technically by modern anyway, it's a sort of antelope that you find in India. But the word mriga is used in Sanskrit indifferently for what we would now classify as deers or antelope. But the adult has these little kind of straight horns like this, not like the horns that we have here for deer. Anyway, what happens? So this doe, frightened by the tiger growl, jumps up, and her baby fawn, I think is called a fawn, the baby deer, comes out, but the mother runs away, and so here's this little newborn baby deer all by himself, no mother, and so on. So he's kind of all living beings. What would you do? Okay, let's save this this baby deer, and so he kind of took care of it and somehow or other fed it, and he became very attached. These are the dangers of pet ownership. You become affectionate, and this is a pious animal because Maharaj Bharat extols it, because it's stated in the scriptures that land is pious wherever the footprints of this black deer are found, and so on. So it's kind of very elevated. But he fell in love, became very, very attached and affectionate to this deer. And so much so he would worry about it. He's performing one of his spiritual duties, and he doesn't see the deer. Oh, where could have it gone? He became distracted. Distracted. And that distraction gradually, of course, the deer one time didn't come back, and he was looking for it in the night. He fell off a cliff and left his body while thinking of this deer, and therefore he took his next birth. Now, it wasn't so calamitous as that is sometimes, because he maintained his human consciousness. That was his second birth, as the deer that's described, these three births. Which is interesting, which goes to show you that consciousness, or even human consciousness, is not dependent upon the brain. It's separate. So here he had human consciousness. Because he didn't have the vocal apparatus of a human being, he couldn't express himself. But nevertheless, he would, wherever sages were engaged in Krishna Katha, he would stand and listen. He left his body, and then this is the third birth as Jadbharata. Jada means dull or retarded, or something like that. So now he remembers his previous births, and he knows what he did wrong. He got distracted. So that's the danger, distraction. The English poet T.S. Eliot, who in his later years became quite spiritual, in one of his verses he's describing the modern world, and he has the line, distracted from distraction by distraction. That's how far gone it is. People have short attention spans. That's also distraction. Recently, my mother passed away, and I got this book she kept, a baby book. They had them in those days, and she kept it, and had little baby pictures and all these things, and your first drawings and all that kind of stuff. And she also had all my report cards when I was in school. And my teachers always said, first grade, second grade, third grade, easily distracted. So, wow, now I know where that comes from. So distraction is also a problem because pramadaha, one of the offenses against the holy name, is distraction. Literally, it can also mean insanity. Api pramadaha, inattentiveness while chanting. And this is particularly important, even in the context of when we are trying to give our dedicated attention to the holy name, in kirtan and in japa. The first enemy that we have to deal with is distraction, the mind wandering. There's the holy name, there's the object of our attention. Here's all of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, completely accessible. 3 names, Hare, Krishna, and Rama, right there, none different. And wherever Krishna is, everything is there. There's Krishna's associates, Krishna's place, all is there. There's the ultimate information compression, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And we are given that and supremely portable. You don't have to take around books or hard drives or Apple computers. It's right there. It's completely fits right into your mouth. You can take it wherever you go. Say it everywhere as you got. It's an amazing gift to have that Hare Krishna mantra. And we need to take advantage of it, and we have to cultivate the holy name. In the beginning, Prabhupada points out anyone can sit down and chant Hare Krishna or join with us. We don't have any rules. Just join in. We have Harinam on the streets, and we're in front of a bar, and drunks come out and jump up and down and chant. We encourage them to chant, even though they can barely stand up. We do that. But then if you want to become serious, then one has to chant while trying to avoid offenses. Chant on the clearing stage, Prabhupada tells us. And in the Harinam Chintamani of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he discusses the offenses, he says that this pramadaha is actually the offense from which all the other offenses spring. It's the seedbed from which they grow, and that if we are not trying to deal with that offense, we will not be successful in becoming free from the other offenses. Now, it's very interesting because when we say the 10 offenses, then we say, and it's also an offense to be in the chant while chanting, as though like, hey, that's another thing. That's because the list of the offenses come from a text in the Padma Purana, and in the text they're not numbered. And so sometimes in some numberings by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for example, pramadaha is listed as a separate offense, and 2 of the others are put together. So he gets 10 that way. And the other listing, there's 10 offenses and pramadaha isn't particularly mentioned. But the reason, this is my deduction, pramadaha, because it's just tacked on to the end of one of them, and it says api pramadaha. It really applies to all of them, because all of the offenses are ways of not paying attention to Krishna. There's some way or another of being distracted. Distraction means not thinking of Krishna. And since there's nothing but Sri Krishna, everything that we see has to be seen in connection with Krishna. This Krishna consciousness means that the whole content of our attention should be Krishna in one form or another. Prabhupada even said in a lecture, "Don't see a tree, see Krishna." Does that mean that the tree is God? No. But it's Krishna's tree. It belongs to him. It's Krishna's jiva that's in the body of the tree. The material energy gave him that tree. The tree belongs to Krishna. We should appreciate it as a fellow jiva in a somewhat unfortunate circumstance. But we don't think this tree, it's my tree, it belongs to me, or I can chop it down and use its wood as I feel like. We have to have some respect. And we have to see that tree in connection with Krishna. Don't see a tree, see Krishna. So that's how we should see. So all the offenses are forms of pramadaha. But of course, when we are chanting japa, then we fix our attention on the holy name, and we discover that at a certain point, it just dawned on me that I may have left something at home that I should have brought with me. Now I have to go get it, and that's going to be hard because, and maybe the car won't work, and that's right, I have to take it to grid. And the next thing you know, you're way out here. When it started just noticing that, you forgot something. You forgot your cell phone. Now I have to go, whatever. So then when you notice your mind is wandering, you bring it back. And this is chanting on the clearing stage. We're trying to correct that distraction by bringing the mind back. At least we're showing Krishna that we are interested in a relationship. Because really when we're chanting japa, we're asking for a relationship. We broke it. We want to be restored. Please take me back. So that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives this he actually in the Harinam Chintamani gives it special prominence, that it's the seed bed from which all the other offenses are allowed to grow, and if we're not dealing with this one, we won't be able to deal with the other ones. So these are distractions. And other offenses do disobey the order of the spiritual master, and Prabhupada here focuses on this particular one. Interesting how Prabhupada does this, because here the question, he had attained perfection, or at least a degree of perfection, and had fallen down. So the lesson we should learn is never think you've attained perfection so that you can never fall down. You can be, really very advanced, and there still can be some little danger. It would be rare, but it could happen. And Bharat Maharaj is interesting because his affection for this deer was kind of innocent and, caring for animals and fair creatures and, our fellow creatures and all these other things. And it's a pious animal. It's not a dog. But that's what happened. So the warning is that. So Prabhupada said he should have, gotten permission. Is it okay that I, taking care of this deer or not? Is it all right? He says this. But Prabhupada, it's interesting here that he quotes this previous verse about one needs, to make advancement, one needs the dust of the lotus feet of the great devotees on one's head. And he says here, if one always follows the orders of the spiritual master, there's no question of falling down. This is particularly something that Prabhupada stresses so much, because he learned from a negative example and then a positive example. Because he had the experience of watching the whole work of Bhaktisiddhanta seem to fall apart. And it happened while Bhaktisiddhanta was started, when Bhaktisiddhanta was present. That is to say, Bhaktisiddhanta. Let me go back. While I was doing research on the position of Srila Prabhupada for the GBC, and I was able to get a hold of the volumes of The Harmonist. That was a Gaudiya Math magazine. In 1927, Bhaktisiddhanta had the Sajjanatoshini, a Bengali language journal started by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, changed into an English language journal called The Harmonist. They said a rough translation of Sajjanatoshini. And then he had another, the Gaudiya, another periodical in Bengali. But the main one was now in English language, and Bhaktisiddhanta himself was always listed as the editor. He was the editor. Sometimes when in the harmonists they were telling where Bhaktisiddhanta was going and what he was doing, it says the editor went here, the editor went here, the editor did this, the editor initiated disciples, the editor gave sannyas. As though he was the editor. And of course the de facto editor, or the hands-on guy, was his disciple Nishikant Sanyal, professor of history at Ravenshaw College, very, very good in English. His initiated name was Narayan Das. Anyway, I was reading these harmonists, and I got you from this, because started in 1927, because they were focused on world preaching. I mean, the crowning glory of the Gaudiya Math was to establish the movement in the West. That was their big aim. And very quickly, Bhaktisiddhanta had managed to spread it all over India. And then their big step was 1933, when he sent missionaries armed with a big English language book to London, and wanted to establish a temple in London. And they had the money from the Maharaj of Tripura. He was going to pay for it. And then it all fell apart. He recalled his main preacher and told the Maharaj of Tripura not to give him any money, and wouldn't even see him when he came. And because there was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had one idea of how preaching should go on in the West, and this preacher had a different idea. He had some experience and thought maybe he knew better. Well, we should do like this. But there were other disagreements that were there, and Prabhupada told how his spiritual master said there will be a fire in the mat, meaning the Calcutta temple, where everybody was fighting with each other over rooms, and Bhaktisiddhanta was becoming quite disgusted. They had lost their unified, people had personal ambitions and whatever. So Prabhupada, but when the Gaudiya Math was powerful, it was really, everyone was working together. In a short time, they'd spread all over India, and even had a temple in Burma, Rangoon, and started with, and had little outposts in London and Berlin, and they were just going to keep going. Bhaktisiddhanta was planning to go to London, and then he was going to go to America. That was all the big plan, and they were like fizzing with spiritual energy. And Prabhupada saw it collapse. And that was the reason, the orders of the spiritual master. They had neglected the orders of the spiritual master. And as soon as a foolish disciple tries to overtake his spiritual master and become ambitious to occupy his post, because what happened with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he did not name a successor. He did not name anybody as the next acharya, which is the typical thing that was done when there was an institution like this in India. And he, in his last days, he called for a governing body commission. He was speaking, it was written down. We have that will, that original document in the Bhaktivedanta Research Center. It's in ISKCON's care. You can see it. And it didn't happen. Instead, one of his leaders decided he was going to be the next acharya. In other words, he wanted that post. He wanted that post. Well, a lot of people didn't like him, so they got their own candidate to be the counter acharya. Then they had two. One centered in the temple in the Gaudiya Math. The temple in Calcutta was called the Gaudiya Math, and the temple in the other one was their headquarters in Mayapur, which was supposedly the central temple of all of the Gaudiya Math temples, the Sri Chaitanya Math in Mayapur. And that was somebody else was there, and they fought with each other to occupy that post. So this is what's in Prabhupada's mind when he talks about wanting to become the spiritual master. Because Prabhupada said that his credit was that I have always remained his servant. And what Prabhupada did and what he attributes his success is he strictly followed what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted. He preached the way his spiritual master wanted to preach, and he followed his orders, and always considered himself always remained the servant. Took that on his head. And he wants us to also understand this same lesson. So that's Prabhupada's particular by experience, to the direct experience, what happens when this is disobeyed. And so Prabhupada, he took it up, by himself. I mean, really, it was sort of Krishna's lesson about following the order of the spiritual master, because he was told in his first meeting, because he was English educated to preach in the West, and he was told in the final letter to do the same thing. And Prabhupada said, I didn't know what I would be able to do. I couldn't imagine. At that time, he said he got this last letter. I was a householder. I was doing business. Prabhupada wrote him. He said, I'm a householder. I can't serve you very much. My godbrothers, there's sannyasis and brahmacharis, there's doing so much. Is there anything I can do? He wrote him. At that time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was in Puri trying to recover. He didn't, ultimately. And he got a letter saying, yes, you can. And he gave him the same order he'd given his big leaders, you preach in English, which meant go to the West. Prabhupada said, wow. But then he remembered that was the very first thing he said. So he just said, I took it to heart. Especially he said, he read Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on the Vyavasa Atmaka Buddhi verse in the Bhagavad Gita, saying that fixed intelligence is to take the order of the spiritual master as your life and your soul, and don't consider anything else. And so the Prabhupada said, I tried in that way. He was explaining to devotees in Los Angeles, how did we get together? It was the disappearance day of Bhaktisiddhanta. You're in one country, I'm in another, how are we together? Well, this is how. And so Prabhupada did it. And by the time he did it, he also started an English language magazine like the Gaudiya Math did. In 1944, he started Back to Godhead magazine. The Gaudiya Math didn't send their preachers to the West until they had an English language book. Prabhupada was supposed to be 3 volumes eventually, the Sri Krishna Chaitanya, but they had one when they went. Prabhupada had the Bhagavatams. He followed exactly. But he didn't have any resources. He had no money, no institutional backing. The first thing he finally did when he got to New York was also write back to his godbrothers and the different fragments of the mats to help him out. There was some money for a New York temple in India. He had a donor ready to send it, but the Indian government wouldn't release the money to be taken out of India. That's why Prabhupada only had 40 rupees when he came here. They wouldn't release it. But some of his godbrothers had very good connections. They just took a little trouble. They could get the money released. Nobody helped them. And he said, I'll just be a servant of your servant. I'll be part of your organization, he wrote. Anyway, it didn't happen. So Prabhupada ended up doing it all by himself without money, institutional support. He was 70 years old, didn't have youthful energy, didn't have good health, and he succeeded. And I personally believe all those lack of assets was to show that his one big asset was the thing, this fidelity to the order of his spiritual master. Therefore, he stresses very much on this. Don't become distracted. This is the first big distraction. We shall understand what Srila Prabhupada wanted. All of us who are also spiritual masters, we are supposed to also remain the servants. We do never become anything but Srila Prabhupada's servant and transmit the same order to everybody else. Okay, I'll stop there as we have a few minutes if there are any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Beautiful, beautiful class, as usual. It's just interesting in this context that it's not mentioned anywhere that he has a spiritual master, but Prabhupada's referring to the fact that he disobeyed the orders of the spiritual master. Mm-hmm. I just make one comment about that, and I would like you to say more if you could. But I was reading Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and in context of what is Harinam initiation. The holy name is free and open to everyone, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in one of his commentaries in the 6th canto that if one doesn't take the holy name from a spiritual master when one's available, then it's considered to be the third offense, disobeying the orders of the spiritual master, and therefore one's chanting a nam aparad. Mm-hmm. In other words, without taking shelter of a spiritual master, one can't chant the holy name offenselessly. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that was just sort of a side comment, but I was wondering if you could say more about this context, how Prabhupada's saying that he's made an offense by not following the order of a spiritual master, but there's no spiritual master really visible or mentioned anywhere there.
Yeah. If this, at some point he was a Kshatriya, he was a king, he had his brahmanas, and he's the one that, in text 12, he mentions this, to smear the body with the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees, so somewhere, one of his births, he had it. May not have been available when he went to the forest, or maybe there were forest sages that he was taking instruction from that's just not mentioned here. But you and I don't have our spiritual master around, but boy, we know his instructions. We can consult with Srila Prabhupada. He's told us that. He said, I've told you everywhere. So if the spiritual master is not available directly, one can always find out. You should always know what his instructions and what he's given like that. So we construct Prabhupada's instructions all the time. But some of us had memories, and then of course all these purports, one after another. The tape recorder was on so many times. we find what we thought. We find what he says. It's there, because it really means that the point that he's making here, to consult the spiritual master, is not possible unless one is humble. That it seems to hear that here, at least in most cases, this is what happens. One always has to remain the servant, never become the master. This is how advancement in Krishna consciousness takes place. It's not like corporate America, where that's the path of pride, or the government, or any of these material institutions. You want to become bigger and bigger and bigger. We want to become smaller and smaller and smaller. Devotees seek out humility not because they're some kind of masochists who want to suffer or who have low self-esteem. It's because the more humble we come, the more love of God will increase. And therefore people are interested in love of God, so therefore they eagerly seek out humility. And so this is the basis for always following the order of the spiritual master. And when Prabhupada was asked, why isn't the spiritual master mentioned in the Shashastika prayers? he cited the third one, Janadapi Sunichena. That's how, without a spiritual master, it's very hard for those people, to actually become humble. But just the example you mentioned about initiation. In the beginning, Prabhupada said on chanting, anyone can chant Hare Krishna, but one has to then, at a later stage, everybody reports that when they first come to Krishna consciousness, they just start chanting and they immediately feel some kind of spiritual acceleration and they make a huge amount of advancement and then after a while it kind of goes away, maybe after they get initiated, or and then they have to work really hard. This is such a common phenomena that I've heard it explained, I think wrongly, that in the beginning Krishna gives you some extra, spiritual boost just to encourage you, but then you have to work on it on your own. He kind of takes it away. It's my phone. I forgot to turn off the buzzer. So there's a distraction, huh? That's my ringtone. There we go. Excuse me.
When you made that last statement, did I hear you correctly? You said that some people say that, but you think it's done incorrectly?
Yeah, because what really happened, I mean, it's not exactly wrong, but a more precise explanation of what happens. In the very beginning, you come and you start chanting Hare Krishna. And for example, you come with the devotees and you start associating chanting Hare Krishna. You think all the devotees are great souls. You don't commit Vaishnava aparadh. Later you get to know them. But in the very beginning, they're all great souls. They're wonderful, You don't disobey the order of the spiritual master because you don't even know what it is. It's not an offense against the spirit; it's your unfortunate condition. But so in the beginning, it's really easy not to commit an offense because you're ignorant. But then you start to associate with devotees. And you find out, that this guy has this habit that everywhere he goes, he leaves his dirty socks. And why is he like that? They're supposed to be clean, And then it becomes harder to appreciate the good qualities of devotees while also dealing with them as normal human beings. You really have to work on it. So this is what happens. I think in the beginning there's a kind of you simply, are not able to commit so many offenses. You don't know what the spiritual master is. You think that devotees are great souls. So this is what happens, I think. So one has to chant on the clearing stage. One has to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra while trying to give up offenses. At least the clearing stage, one makes advancement. It's not the Shuddhanam is not apparent, but at least there's Namabhas, the dawning light of the holy name that destroys all sinful reactions and actually brings one to the point of liberation. The pure name gives prema. So that we have to follow the process. Maybe I should ask somebody else.
Prabhu, thank you very much for coming to Chicago. It's a great honor to host you and
Thank you
all the devotees.
Forcing me to come here to the GBC.
On the point of, in the beginning, we appreciate the qualities of the devotees, and then later it gets harder. It seems to suggest that in the beginning one is more humble, and then as one practices, that becomes a stumbling block, or that one is not humble anymore. But by the practice of Krishna consciousness, one is supposed to become actually humble, or consciously practicing it. So is there something else happening? Because in the beginning, a person just walks into either the temple or the association of devotees, and humility is not necessarily an asset.
At least for me, I really did. I thought they were all great souls. At least they'd given up everything and were following Krishna and stuff like that. But then if you're going to deal and live with people, then you find out that although they are giving up on so many things and trying to follow Krishna, they also have many faults and difficulties, and sometimes they may have done that, but at the same time, every time somebody gets the maha plate before you do, there's none left over. Every time. You just go, not one piece for me, Now, how do you deal with that? He's a devotee, Now, if you're really advanced, you just think, oh, that's wonderful, he needs it, and I'll just, here's one crumb left, that's enough for me because one crumb is the same, whatever, But then you can get angry and you say, and then you plan to get the plate first, and then you've got a material competition going. Because really the thing is, maybe the person, it's also a status, you're the senior devotees, they get the, anyway. So then you start to treat ISKCON like it's IBM, and you want to become something like that. So what one has to do is you have to appreciate devotees, maybe if not what they are right now, for what they're trying to become, or just the fact that they're interested in Krishna consciousness is such a great, wonderful thing that all the other difficulties are temporary and they'll go away. And then if I'm honest, I say, how many faults do I have? I'm probably irritating all kinds of other people too, and like that, And if you can, just be simple like that, and just it's for our own good, our spiritual advancement, that we treat each other with respect. And when something bad happens, you just don't take it so seriously. But it's easy to be. It's true. It's easy to be humble around humble people. It's much harder to be humble when somebody comes in lording it over you, because then you want to do it back. At least if you're a man, you want to do it back. So we have to learn these things. We have to. Yeah. Anything else? You had something else you wanted? Oh, over here. Okay, we'll get to you at the end. I don't want to go too far off schedule.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. My question is regarding the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who developed this competitive spirit. I'm having difficulty understanding this, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is a very elevated personality, so he should, I'm understanding he would have some idea of the sincerity of the prospective disciple.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you because
Sorry.
it's airplane.
Maybe I can put the question in just a more concise way. Why do we see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada initiating so many disciples, and many of them perhaps weren't able to come to the platform of what is required of a, forgive me, but like a real disciple? They still maintain this competitive spirit with their spiritual master. And then the second part is this something that was going on prior to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur?
People were getting initiated and falling down, at least in Kali Yuga, it's always a problem. Any religious organization you'll see with very high standards, the real problem with high standards, it has a downside. The downside of high standards is fault finding. We have very high standards, and then we look at everybody else. They did this. It's even there. You see it among in the realm of Mahaprabhu. You should read the story about Ramachandra Puri, who was a godbrother of Madhavendra Puri. A disciple of Madhavendra Puri, godbrother of Ishwara Puri. And Ishwara Puri is the good disciple, and Ramachandra Puri is the bad disciple. He had failed in his major thing, his relationship with his spiritual master, and he became a big fault finder. He would come to Puri and say, everybody's eating too much. The followers of the Lord, you're eating too much. He used to say, people, have something more to eat, have something more to eat, have something more to eat. And then he'd say later, do you see how much he ate? Because on the major thing he had failed, and then he became punctilious about some little thing, a fault finder. That's what comes from high standards. You don't live up to them, then maybe you want to do something else to maintain your self-esteem. What is needed is honesty, sharalata, simplicity. One has to be honest with oneself and frank. Because here's the thing, we have a very high standard. Here's the beginning of Krishna consciousness, here's the end of Krishna consciousness, and devotees are distributed somewhere along this line. And if we look what our standard is, the pure devotee, right? That's our standard, the pure devotee. And ISKCON is very, very good at sticking this ideal in our heart. This is what I should become, a pure devotee. And then if I look at myself honestly, I think, wow, And you have to remember, by the way, no pure devotee thinks he or she is a pure devotee. They think everyone else is a devotee but me. This is this high standard, the pure devotee standard. And the thing is, how do we productively deal with the fact that here I am and here's my ideal? The way we don't deal with it is pretend I'm here or focus on how many other people are worse. The way I deal with it is frankness and say, yes, I have a long way to go, that I'm honest. And the way we should deal with others, we don't judge people whether they're here, 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 or here. We should judge people by simply, are they sincerely trying to get better? Because even if you're really advanced, look at Maharaj Bharata. At one point he stopped sincerely trying to get better. You can be pretty far up there, and if you're not still advancing, you can fall down. And if a person is not very advanced but is taking at least the next step to remove anarthas, to improve their sadhana, to read more, they're taking the next step, that person is good. That should be the standard of judgment for ourselves and for other people. Because that gap is there. And we will make advancement if we are honest with ourselves about ourselves. And we don't make a substitution. Somebody secretly, I know I'm not very advanced, but look how much money I collect. Or I'm really good at Sanskrit pronunciation. These other devotees, they don't. Every time they say a verse, they mangle it. I start finding fault with other people, and therefore my own interior misgivings feel better. And you see this kind of. We should have a study, a pneumopathology, the study of spiritual diseases, because these are the various things that happen, and we should know them and learn how to, first ourselves, and help other people out properly when that develops. So the actual bane of any high demand religious group is one of the main ways people deal with not dealing with their real problems is fault finding. other people. Anyway, it's a big topic. We have a schedule to meet, don't we? You should tell me when to stop. Now you bring up this topic, everyone's really interested, right? Okay. Go. You had your hand next.
Hopefully you repeat the last sentence you said, not finding faults. You said something that I just didn't hear.
I don't remember the last sentence I said. What fault finding is a product of our own uneasiness about our own faults and not dealing with them. And then if we see that other people have faults, then we feel better about ourselves. So one has to be honest. Prabhupada quotes Bhaktisiddhanta, the first qualification of devotee is charlata, simplicity. And he said the opposite of simplicity is duplicity. So it's a kind of honesty or straightforwardness about oneself. No concealment, reactions of trying to conceal things from yourself or other people. Prabhu?
First of all, I mess up and I'm fault finding. And I go, oh my God, I'm doing it again. And it's like, now what do I do?
Oh, okay. Now that you and you're stopping fault finding, you stop it when it happens, and then you do the opposite. Every time you see somebody, good quality of somebody, you recognize it, you acknowledge it, you glorify it. And the main thing is when we do the basic things in Krishna consciousness, if we chant the holy name while trying to give up offenses, we will make advancement. If we are making advancement, then everything looks great. If we're stuck in Krishna consciousness, we're not making advancement, and we won't really deal with what the problem is, then it's the reason I can't follow the principles, there's no pure devotees on the planet. The reason I can't follow the principle of the GBC is this. The reason, if we start making advancement, ISKCON looks better. All the devotees, everyone looks better. Everything looks better. There's hope, You can sit and you can read Srimad Bhagavatam and you can say, the Srila Prabhupada, he keeps saying the same thing over and over again. It's just really boring. And if you're on the clearing platform, you pick up, wow, look what he's saying. This is just what I wanted. Every sentence is a revelation, As a scripture becomes like really interesting and valuable to your life. I mean, there's such a change. So if one is stuck on the offensive platform of chanting, one has to immediately, and you can very immediately go to the clearing stage. And to me, the first thing you do is you start paying attention while you're chanting japa. Whenever your mind wanders, you bring it back. And you just persist. You don't quit. Because it may wander a lot. And you wonder, why is my mind trying to escape from the holy name? Because the really good news is you're not your mind. And your mind is not a Vaishnava. You're born with this mind because we blew it in the last life. We took birth again. And it's that mind full of material desires that brought us here. So it's like you're sharing your body. It's like having a roommate that's not, a difficult person who does not clean and anything. You're living in the same body with this mind. And you got to really, give it to him. And force your mind to focus on the holy name and to chant Hare, not just so your mouth is going Hare Krishna, but just up here it's going Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And one starts doing that, to me that's a good place to start. Then you can start dealing with all the other offenses. And just be persistent. Do whatever you have to do to be able to chant like that. And if we're sincere, praying to Krishna this way, He'll make arrangements for us. He'll give us help. He'll give us the right association. He'll remove obstacles. But we have to, show Him that we're interested. Why should He give us tons of spiritual information if we're not interested. Instead, I really want to find out what happens in the last season of Breaking Bad or something, you know. There's some TV series, Breaking Bad, and it's come to the last. I just saw in the newspaper, people are talking, what's going to happen, you know. Some story about some chemistry high school teacher becomes a meth dealer and disintegrates or something like that. And so the whole half of America is talking about what's going to happen in the final season of Breaking Bad. Yeah. You know The Sopranos? You remember that one? There was a big, big TV series on HBO about this mafia guy called The Sopranos. His name was Tony Soprano. He was a mafia boss, and all America was watching this. Talk about being distracted from distraction. Their lives are already a distraction from Krishna, and now they're distracted from their own lives by following these fictional, series on television, which is just nonsense. It's just all made up. We should stop now. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada.